Hey everyone, it's Dr. Steph. I'm one of the lecturers for the Financial Literacy curriculum at U of T Med, and in this video I'm going to talk about one of the most asked questions from my students and colleagues, how to budget and how to get started managing your money. So in this video I'm going to show you how I budget and track expenses, as well as what app I use to track overall net worth across multiple accounts and different asset classes. After all, personal finance is personal, and it can be hard to create a budget or track expenses when you don't even know where to start or you've never seen an example. And it can be a bit awkward to ask someone else to see their personal spending habits. In fact, when I polled my classes, about 732 students across multiple schools that I teach at about their budgeting and expense tracking, most students just buy what they want, or they check their bank accounts and, don't really know where their biggest areas of spending is. And like I say in class, to increase your net worth, you either make more money or you spend less money. And everyone's always super focused on making more money. That as a student, developing the discipline to spend less money is another way to build your net worth too. After all, seeing rich celebrities like Lady Gaga or Rihanna filing for bankruptcy goes to show that it doesn't matter if you have $100 or $100 million in your bank account. If you don't know how to manage your money, you can still end up in debt. So I know that there's a lot of budgeting and expense tracking apps out there, and you can Google top budgeting apps, but I personally prefer using a spreadsheet simply because that's what accountants ask for, and it also allows me to personalize things a bit more. And I also try to avoid having my personal financial info available on third-party apps connected to my bank account. But if you prefer to use an app, some banks have developed their own budgeting apps as well. All right, so I'm just going to share screen to my tracking spreadsheet, and I want to let you know that I've included a downloadable version of this exact same spreadsheet that looks like this in the description below. That way you can have a copy of my expense tracking spreadsheets to have it open to follow along in this video or for your use as well. So back to my spreadsheet. So as you can see, I've been tracking cash flow for a long time, since 2014. And let's talk about the income and the expenses categories, just because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, not knowing how to categorize their spending. So for myself, my income sources, I have rental, payroll income. So, I have separate spreadsheets for my corporation as well as for personal. So this is my personal spreadsheet. And through my corporation, I pay myself a salary. So that's why this is called payroll. Tutoring and lectures, salary. Collect AR, which means collect accounts receivable. So that's like when someone owes me money and then they pay me back. It's not really income. But I just put that there as cash inflow, and then miscellaneous. And then for my expense categories, cash outflow. So these are kind of my my categories. And if you're kind of just, a student, or, you're just trying to read this and it's like kind of weird. It's like, why do you have advertising on there, right? So kind of the backstory behind why some of these are named the way they are, like advertising, business licenses, and so on. Is because I used to file my own taxes before getting an accountant. And as a sole proprietor, I used this form called the T2125 form. So it looks kind of like this. And if you go to this page, and this is what a lot of sole proprietors use to file their taxes. As you can see here, advertising, meals and entertainment, bad debts, and so on. So that's where I got my expense categories from. And probably where your accountant will be looking as well. But, some of them might not be applicable to you, right? It's kind of random, like advertising, like if you're a student, or if, I don't know, most sole proprietors, they may not have that as particular expense. So if you wanted to change it, right? So let's say you go to your spreadsheet, you go to, instead of changing it like on this row right here, you can go to this tab right here, expense categories. And let's say you're a student, right? Obviously advertising is not like relevant for you compared to a sole proprietor. So you can change it to something else, like for example, I don't know, tuition, or like, let's say business licenses, right? That's more relevant to me, not for a student. So you can change that to like clothing. And if you go back, as you can see, it changes this right here, change it tuition, clothing, and it changes it up here as well, tuition and clothing. So for income, so as you can see, these are my sources of income, but it might be different for you as well. So let's say if you're a student watching this, you might want to change it to something like, you don't have rental income coming in, right? So you might have government loans, or, you might not have payroll because you're not, you might not be getting a salary. So maybe you might want to change that to, I don't know, like scholarships. And then when you go back here, you'll notice government loan scholarships, and it's changing it right here. And if you're a student, let's say you don't have a monthly salary, right? So, a lot of students will ask me, how do I budget if I don't have a monthly salary? So whenever you get a lump sum of money, like a grant in September, I usually looked at how many months until my next grant was. And usually that would be in the winter semester, like January. So I divided the fall grant amount by the number of months between September and January, and that's how much I have of the grant to spend each month. Some students have a student line of credit. So, for a doctor, for example, a student line of credit might be $350K. Back when I had it, it was only $200K. And you would divide that by the number of years you would be in school. So, let's say 4 years of medical school plus 5 years of residency. So that's 9 years. And then divide that by 12 months. And as you can see, you only have about $3,240 per month, right? So the point I wanted to make here is, when you see you have a huge line of credit, like 350,000, it looks like a lot, but when you actually spread it out over time and really see how much you actually can spend of it per month at the cap, you only can spend 3,200 or so of it per month, right? So that's kind of my maximum budget I had as a student to cover expenses that month, including like rent and, textbooks and things like that. And let's say I had a grant that month or a scholarship that month, and I didn't need that 3,000 or so to cover rent and textbooks that month. So I either paid that amount back into my line of credit, I invested it, or I gave some to my parents if they needed it. And this was more so in the summers when I was not paying tuition, but had more income coming in through summer jobs. Now back to the main graph. So let's say this is this graph right here, right? The reason why I have this pie chart here is so that the pieces of the pie moves in real time with each expense or contribution that you might make to your investments. So that's what I use to kind of help me budget. So for example, let's say in this month, I spent $1,000 on wedding gifts. So as you can see, like that populates in real time. Let's say I had to pay my medical license, right? That's usually in the 2000s. So let's say I spent, I don't know, 2,000 there. That also eats into, and that takes up more of the pie as well. So as you can see, it kind of moves in real time as well with adjustments here. And the reason I have it like this is due to something called the 50-30-20 budgeting rule. So as you can see, it has a pie graph right here as well. And this is a good rule to provide a general guideline on budgeting. And it's, I think, good for students and young people to check out. In fact, it was developed by Senator Elizabeth Warren. So, you have 50% as the essentials like housing, and no more than 30% of that should go to rent, groceries, utilities, and so on. 20% for either savings or, savings to pay down your debt down in the future, and then 30% for fun and donations and so on. So as I see that pie chart move in real time, I can kind of see that it might be moving more than 50% if I'm spending more on rent that month. I can see if I'm exceeding 30% and so on. And for you guys, like, you can change the colors so that it matches more of the colors of the 50-30-20 rule as well. I just have it as these colors for now. So, back to this graph here. So I usually check my accounts, bank accounts and investing accounts once every month, and then I enter the data manually in here. I know that there are some, like for example, money in Excel, that's an application for Excel that might auto-populate, but I personally don't use it because I like being able to manually enter it in and seeing like what exactly the spending is on. Sometimes, in your bank account, it might have like a weird acronym or something and you don't know what that is. So when I find I'm manually typing it in, it makes me think about how I'm spending. And it kind of makes me more mindful of where I'm spending, and more intuitive around, whether I spend more in one particular area than another. So as you can see on the sheets, I have that all listed here. And then at the end of the month, right, you can press this minus sign right here and it shrinks January's graph. And then February, you can just expand it right here and enter in your new expenses for January. And up here, in order to change this pie graph here, you just type in the month number. So for example, February is month number 2. So you just type in 2, and then that resets the graph based on your expenses. So let's say type in 1,000 here. And as you can see, it kind of moves and changes the sections of the graph and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to change that back, and then I'm just going to shrink the graph again. So now I'm just going to draw your attention to this section of the spreadsheet. So maybe you'll see it better on this one. Yeah, here. So this section. So the reason I have this graph, so basically the gray bar tells you the total income that you made, and then the red bar tells you how much you spent that month. And the reason I have this graph is due to a budgeting strategy called the zero-based budget. And so what zero-based budget means to put every dollar that comes in to use, whether it be put towards the expenses or invested. So this is a good article if you want to read more about zero-based budgeting, as well as other budgeting strategy as well, just like the 50-30-20 budget I just talked about. So the reason I have it like this is so that I can see how much I spent, but more importantly, how much I have left. And I try to invest as much as I can of what is left to really maximize each dollar so that it can compound over time. And then the other tab I wanted to draw your attention to is the TFSA and the RRSP tabs. So TFSA, and so the reason why I have this section in the budgeting spreadsheet is because I like to keep a running tally of how often I contribute or take money out of the TFSA. And here I've included a link where you can calculate your TFSA maximum contribution room. I find that if you accidentally over contribute, and that can be really punitive, because any dollar of over contribution over the limit based on your age, that's taxed at 1% per month. And then for the RRSP, any contribution in excess of $2,000 above the maximum RRSP room you have, that also gets taxed at 1% per month as well. So now for the app that I use for net worth tracking and debt pay down. So it's called 𝗬𝘚, and I'm not sponsored by this app, by the way. I just use them because they're free and they're Canadian made. But if you're American and watching this video, Personal Capital is a similar app, only in the States, and it does kind of the same thing. So right now I'm using the desktop version, and I put it in private mode, so that's why you can't actually see the total net worth here. All you can see is that over the last 6 months, the net worth went up by 53%. But what I like about this app is, especially if you have different investments in different accounts, different brokerages, I like how this app can consolidate all of them into one place and into one net worth calculation. So all of your assets minus your liabilities, right? And so for example, you can add in your real estate assets. Some people might have crypto that is in a separate account. They might put that in there. And what I also like about it is that you can input your debt as well. So mortgage payments, every time you make a payment, you can input the new updated leftover mortgage you still have to pay, or other like student loans, for example. And so every time you pay that down, this will subtract it from your liabilities, and that way you can watch your net worth go up. If you're interested in me doing a more detailed review of this app or have any questions about how to use my spreadsheet, please leave me a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified for more lecture updates.